What's up, everyone, and welcome into the Buffalo Sports Collective. It is Wednesday, July 5th, 2023. As always, I am PK alongside my co-host, Phil. Phil, it's been a very busy week in Buffalo. Some good news and some very depressing, sad news. But how was your week without recording? Because now that we're down to one a week, we really only talk on this thing once a week, which is, I'm saying once a week a lot here.
It's like a mini vacation every time, but at the same time, it's a lot to keep up with for a whole week. It's a lot to cram into one show. When things such as this happen, when a lot actually occurs in Buffalo sports that we have to talk about, and then it kind of becomes a lot all for one episode. But this is the slow season for most of our teams, so for the most part, it's a little relaxing, kind of nice. Just enjoy whatever the heck is going on in life, I guess.
That is fair. We have not had this in the 2+ years of recording as downtime, but we do have it. So if you want to join along with us on our downtime, you can follow along with us on Facebook and Instagram at Buffalo Sports Collective, and on Twitter at Buffalo Sports Co. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out our website at buffalosportscollective.com and look for the time breakdowns in the description of the show. Phil, we'll start with the sad and we'll move on to the fun and exciting news. The PHF, which is the Professional Hockey Foundation or Federation for the women's sports, which the Buffalo Beauts played for, it's gone. It's no longer existing. It was bought out by the PWHPA. All of the players' contracts with the PHF were voided. Basically, they were just bought for spare parts. It was pretty much them buying them out, so there would be just one women's professional hockey league in Northern America. And it's pretty much stinks because the reason we're talking about this is the Buffalo Beauts are not for certain, but all the more likely non-existent anymore. A lot of the PHF teams are going to be gone. I know the PWHPA, which I guess that's one positive. We don't have to say that 50 million times. They don't like any of the PHF's names. So a lot of the host cities are going to be changing. There's probably no Boston. There's probably no Buffalo. Probably no Connecticut. It definitely stinks. PHF players are going to have to try out for the new league. There's just going to be 6 teams in it. So the 120 plus signings that happened in this offseason for the PHF, they don't happen anymore. It was definitely I don't want to say a major surprise because there was rumors this was happening, but to see the level that they kind of, screwed over all the players in the PHF kind of really stinks.
Yeah, I mean, there's no real nice way to talk about what happened. Like you said, there were rumors about it possibly happening, so we weren't 100% sure one way or the other, but I mean, to lose certain areas and teams like Boston, Buffalo, and Connecticut, I mean, those are some bigger ones, especially Boston and Buffalo, so those seem a little weird to just oust right away. And like you said, all these players that had signed contracts to play on teams again this next season, we're probably obviously looking forward to that, really excited to sign another contract with a professional women's hockey team, and now those are all just gone, and you have to now try out for fewer teams and less spots, so a lot of those players will not be able to continue playing, at least for this year, until, maybe they expand in the future, whatever. But I mean, a lot of those players, it's a big bummer. I mean, and like you said, for us, it's not 100% certain there's no Buffalo, but it seems to be trending that way. So for us who just started covering the team and we're really starting to get into it after one season, we also kind of lose out on them as well. So there's really just no sugarcoating this or making it kind of fun, light, and happy. It's just, for the most part, sad and disappointing.
Yeah, I think this is, in the grand scheme of it, the right move, having one professional women's hockey league to pour all your resources into, and all your best players are playing in one league, which there would have been overlap between these two leagues like there was last year. For me, it was the players found out when the rest of the public did. It just seems like a very scummy move that the PHF put over other players. Like, they could have said, hey, this is coming down. It's not like it was a snap of the finger and you got bought out the next day. Everybody knew this was coming along the lines. Why wasn't this kind of brought to light because you had 120 some odd players sign deals this offseason or have deals transfer over from the previous deal or last year if they had signed multiple year deals in the past. There are players that uplifted their lives, that signed leases for homes to move to the areas that they're going to be playing in, that pretty much, they uprooted their entire daily lives to do this. I mean, Buffalo just signed 2 players from Japan that were going to be moving over to North America. That's where I have a big problem with it, because you kind of knew this was coming along the lines. There was rumors in February and March. Why wasn't this pushed towards the players? I mean, everybody that just signed like a PHF contract, like you had Emma Newton in, you had the 2 players from Japan that just signed over. You had Dominique Kramer and Summer Rae Dobson just reworked their deals for the Beauts. It just thinks that so many of these people and the people in the front offices are going to be losing their jobs for all this. I mean, even Regan Carey, the PHF commissioner, who does have a new job in the other one, she just went on record and just said, hey, we had the highest cap in women's sports. No, you didn't. I mean, you can say that the cap was going to raise to $1.5 million in this upcoming season. It didn't take effect, so technically you never had the highest. Who knows if it was actually true? Was that all just for show? It's so frustrating, not just because we're losing a team that was a hit in the Buffalo community, and you could tell how much this team meant to all the players, but just the lying and the trying to make this sound better than it was. It stinks for a lot of players. I think in the grand scheme of it, it's the right move. It's the smart move. It's going to work out well. But just in the meantime, you could have made this so much easier for a lot of these players. It's just, it's very disappointing that the Beauts are probably no longer going to exist, but it's even more frustrating for all the players that, stuck around in the PHF when this other league was formed in 2019, and they kind of just got screwed over. It's kind of like with Live Golf, with the golfers in the PGA. When they signed that deal and there's going to be no punishment, all the PGA players gave up millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to stay true to the PGA, and then Live just comes back after they just made all their money. It doesn't sit right with me, and I feel really, really bad for a lot of these players.
Yeah, you would have hoped they could have put the next season on pause or something while these rumors were happening, or, just kind of like put the entire thing on pause until this was sorted out. I mean, you'd have to assume a league doesn't fold very easily and that these things are kind of talked about for a long time. Maybe not, years or anything, but I can't imagine this happened in a week or anything like that. So, I mean, this is something that's been in the works in a way, in some way, shape, or form, that this was going to be potentially happening. And even like as the PHF and everything you're saying with all the signings and like the 2 players from Japan and all those kind of things, you'd think that the PHF would have been like, hey, we're going through some stuff. It's, we don't know exactly what our future is looking like. We're going to put all future contract signings on hold. Or even if you want to like kind of, you can do them in principle. You can talk to the players. You can get something kind of worked out if you want, but we're not officially letting anyone sign. We're, kind of just putting a pause on the entire league as far as that goes. You can talk to them. You can get something organized. You can say, this is the money we want. This is the contract we want, but we're not allowing anything to officially take place or any official transactions until we get things sorted out. And that way you don't have quite as big of a letdown for all these players and all these contracts just went through. So I don't know. Like you said, it could have been handled much, much better than it was. And overall, just a big disappointment for all those contracts and all the teams and the Buffalo Beauts as a whole.
Yeah, so if this was our one and only season covering the Buffalo Beauts, I was getting very excited for the second season. I was tracking all the contracts. I was watching all the moves that were being made. I was getting very frustrated with the lack of moves that the Buffalo Beauts were doing. It seemed like, and there were conversations out there and rumors out there, there were some big name free agents that wanted to come to Buffalo, and none of those moves were either getting made or getting announced. And I was getting very frustrated, and now that's one less team I have to cover. So I guess that's less work I have to do, but I was willing to put in the work because I liked covering them last year. I thought it was a good change of pace for us to get out of our element again and kind of take on a new team to cover, and it's very disappointing that we can't do it. But like I said, it's more disappointing to all the players that are now out of jobs, that had their lives uprooted. I can't even imagine how they're feeling, so I'm not even going to try. But it's definitely it's disappointing and sad. I think we've used disappointing a lot, but I think that's the word of the day for how we're feeling with this subject. But Phil, unless there's anything else, let's put this to bed. If there's still that little bit of hope, there's not a ton of hope, but there's a little bit of hope that the Buffalo Beauts might stick around, because they haven't officially announced the 6 teams. I think that's coming in maybe November or October, one of those two. I think they were hoping that all the players were going to have, assigned teams. They still don't know if all the PHF players are going to go through a draft, free agency, how those players are going to get assigned. But I guess we'll keep tabs on what's transpiring with the Buffalo Beauts. But if this was the last time, it was a heck of a ride for one season, for us at least. So, Phil, we'll move on to the Buffalo Sabres. They had a draft and free agency open since the last time we talked on the show. And a lot has happened with the Buffalo Sabres since the last time we even talked about the Buffalo Sabres, because I think the season ended and they kind of just went dormant for a while, and that was our plan. But I have a stat before we even dive into the draft picks and our thoughts and opinions, and I know how you feel about the draft, but maybe you got excited. I don't know your personal feelings on this one, but per Joe DiBiase of WGR, 382 Buffalo Sabres have been drafted in the last 40 years. Only 3 have played more than 600 games with the team. They're Rob Ray, Jason Pominville, and Zemgus Girgensson. That is a horrible, horrible list of draft picks that have tried to come into this organization and either left early or didn't pan out, and I think a lot of them haven't panned out, and that goes back to your stance on picks in rounds 2 through 7. Just trade them away. Just get rid of them. But pretty crazy stat there.
How was Ryan Miller not in there?
That's a good call. I don't know how Ryan Miller was not involved. Did he play 600 games though? With the team? This is going to be a question we're going to research right now, because I'm going to... Ryan Miller.
He's played 796, but...
Yeah, so there's no way he played that many with the Sabres.
He played a good, 796. So it's at 200 he would need from other teams. That's 150 right there. Yeah, probably just on. He must have just missed the cut. I don't know what it is, because I'm not doing that amount of math real quick, but he's got to be at over 575. He must have been right under the cutoff. I mean, the point still remains, but I mean, I feel like I would consider him a huge success story of Buffalo. So I feel like I would have used whatever his chopping block was as the split. But 600's fair. I'm not going to take away the stat. Either way, like you said, it's not great to see the amount of homegrown talent either not panning out, not staying on the team, whatever it is. That's not a very big number. I don't know what it is for other teams, so that would be the other thing to kind of look into, what is the stat, because hockey just seems to be that kind of sport where a lot of the draft picks don't end up making it in general or staying on your team forever. So I don't know. I think that'd be an interesting one to look at for all teams, but no matter how you paint it, it's not great looking.
So they went into Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday was the start. Thursday was the finish of drafting, and they had 8 picks. They had 1 in the first round, 2 in the second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, and a seventh. But what were your initial thoughts, if you want to give any, because we don't have to run through all the players. Like we said, there's other podcasts that dive deeper into draft coverage and prospects and stuff like that. We don't do that because we're not experts on it. We leave that to the professionals, but we do give our thoughts and opinions on it. So what was your thoughts and opinions on the draft and how they did, and if there's any pick that stands out to you, if you were unhappy with what they did, if you were unhappy with the lack of moves, because there were not very many trades whatsoever in the entire NHL draft.
I feel like, again, that's just another NHL thing. They just don't really trade all that often on the deadline. I mean, yes, there's some occasionally, and this one especially. Would have thought that the Sabres might have been able to get something done for Olofsson. I know they're looking for picks, it seems like, in general for him, so I'm surprised they weren't able to get, I don't know what they would consider fair value at this point, so I guess that would be the first talking point. What do they consider Olofsson to be valued at? Is he a second, third, fourth, fifth? So, I mean, I guess that would be the big question mark. I guess that's the only trade disappointing kind of thing that I saw, because I thought they were trying to trade him for picks, and I know it was said that teams were interested. So he would have been the one I would have saw getting moved for a pick at trade deadline or draft night. So he's the one, I guess, for trades. That'd be a little sad that didn't happen. But as far as the draft picks go for them, I thought they did a really good job. I mean, Benson is just another similar player that they've gone a lot to recently, which is small and fast and has that motor. I mean, I feel like those are the highlight words for the last few draft picks and draft seasons that they've had, is just smaller forwards, but high motor, high skill, good shot, good stick level ability and everything kind of like that. That seems to be what they're really aiming for. And I don't know, if you look at the Sabres themselves, I feel like they don't have a ton of that as it is. I mean, Tuck, I feel like, is a little bit bigger. Thompson, we know, is a mammoth of a man. Skinner is kind of that player, but at the same time, he's obviously not old by any means, but you got to start having some players behind him. I mean, yes, they're starting to get the Quinns and the JJ Peterkas going. I feel like that's a little bit more of the style that they've been drafting, because even Cousins is a little bit bigger, who you want for your center. So understand that, but it's interesting to see the amount of smaller, talented forwards they're really going for, but it's good to see. I like Benson quite a bit. Wahlberg was the other one that I think at first, that was my first thought was, okay, another small forward, but then you get Wahlberg at, another big power forward, Tage Thompson type player, and absolutely love them to come back with that kind of 1-2 smaller forward, bigger forward combination. And after that, they went after some defense. Overall, really like the draft. I thought they did a good job grabbing a little bit of everything. Again, they have that small forward, big defense, a little bit more of your offensive defense. You have even bigger offensive players they got. And the goalie, again, another one that is, I think he's one of the more interesting ones to come out of this draft, because they kind of took the idea that they had with Levi, see how successful he might be able to be, and got another smaller goalie who obviously has some development to do, but they see the just raw talent that he has and what he can possibly develop into. And I think that's very interesting considering how many goalies they've been going after recently. In general, I mean, it's always good to have goalies in the pipeline. You don't know who's going to pan out, and they take forever to pan out. So I think it's really good to kind of consistently keep drafting them every single year just to have something coming through, because you never know what's going to happen. I mean, the Sabres have been without a quality starting goalie for way too long, so I understand that kind of strategy. But I mean, if you look at UPL, and I think even the goalie last year they drafted was, they're among the bigger goalies, and that seemed to be what they were really aiming for a long time. And now with Levi and now Ratzliff, they're going a little bit smaller, and the players that you see, I mean, again, quick but calm is kind of how they're describing him, and it's very Levi-esque. A smaller goalie, but very quick, and at the same time, we've talked about it a lot with Levi, doesn't seem to overskate the puck too much or overcommit to certain shots or plays, and it seems to be kind of what they got again. So I'm really happy about the kind of continuing the goalie pipeline as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed out and mentioned, because I was going to as well, that each draft, they should just snag a goalie, because you never know which ones are going to hit. Goalie is one of the toughest positions to draft because they take so long to develop. I mean, you even see UPL. There's still fans of him out there that are saying, hey, he's only, 24? He's still got time to develop.
Even look at Allmark. I mean, right. How long? He's 28 now and just hitting his stride now. I mean, that's insane how long it takes, but at the same time, I feel like they play a really long time as well. Like, they can play still at a high level at 31, 32, 33, so because it takes them so long to develop. So yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but even Allmark, just taking that long. It's just how long goalies take, so I think it's just good to keep it going.
Yeah, and always have one in the pipeline that you're developing and ready to step in, because you never, like you said, you never know when the goalies are going to bust and which ones are going to hit. Like you said, Levi, 7th round pick. You didn't know he was going to be like that when you drafted him, because he wouldn't have went in the 7th round. But I think the biggest thing with the lack of trades, and especially Victor Olofsson, which I think still could be traded, is the Jack Quinn injury. He is out 4 to 6 months. That was a giant blow. You came off the high of the Zach Benson pick, and then you get the news that Jack Quinn's out from 4 to 6 because he got hurt in training. And it's an Achilles, and a lot of people are saying, hey, when you hurt your Achilles, sometimes you're never the same type of player. It sounds like it's a better injury to the Achilles, if you want to say that, but it's still, I mean, I think Kevin Adams was the one that said it's closer to the 6-month mark than the 4-month mark, which is a bit concerning, especially when you're going in there hoping that in year 2 he was going to take that next step. It's definitely a giant blow after the good news, and I think we tweeted that out after the positive news. It's a big kick to the groin that you lost Jack Quinn. But I did like the Benson pick. There was talk because, we do as much work as we can, just, seeing who's going to be available at the pick at 13. And a lot of people were saying Benson wasn't going to be there. He played with Savoy. He was right behind Connor Bedard as far as points in the U18 WHL skater in the last 25 years. I mean, he had 98 points in 60 games last year with Winnipeg. He's probably going to go back there. But what they're saying is he's an amazing two-way player. And I can't remember who was on the radio. It might have been Chris Baker was saying that he could be a Patrice Bergeron light. And I mean, I hate trying to compare some of these young players to studs in the league, but I think that's who, and I'm sorry if I'm wrong. I'm sorry if I'm misquoting you, but it was also funny to see that when they draft a smaller guy like Zach Benson and Twitter just blows up and all the Sabres fans just blow up and they go, I don't know why they keep drafting small players. Like, where are those big name players? And then for the rest of the draft, did they draft anybody under 6'1"? Like, this Wahlberg kid's 6'3". He's a giant. I mean, they got a 6'1" and a 6'2" defender, 6'4" battering ram and Medema. It was just, I don't really want to dive into, the rounds 4 through 7 because they got a ton of developing to do. I'm excited that they drafted so many defense because their defense core was so depleted. But I mean, grabbing McCarthy from clearance, that was a fun pick. The Wahlberg guy was, Kevin Adams did say that he was trying to get back up into the first round. I think Paul Hamilton was the one that said they were trying to get back into the first round. Wahlberg was that kid, and they were relaying him to Yuri Kulik from last year, where they said that they kept trying to get up for Kulik and he fell to him, and Wahlberg ended up falling to them in the second round. I think even Adams was saying he was trying to trade up in the second round for them. So it's tough to say. Benson is the highest promise, obviously, because he was drafted that early, but seeing the skill level and the two-way ability that he has, I'm excited to see when the time comes that he's going to be up here. You're going to see him probably in the preseason. I would assume he's going to be playing in the preseason, or he's even at development camp right now. But I'm as excited as you can be for a draft, and it's exciting that a kid that was supposed to be in the top 10 falls to Buffalo at 13.
I think the only other thing that really stood out to me, not as a bad way or anything like that, just interesting, is that after so many Russians recently signed with them and they've had a really good positive, I guess, vibe with the Russian picks, that they've been able to, people are shying away from them, not knowing if they're going to sign. The Sabres have been able to sign most of their Russian players, most of their Russian prospects. You just didn't really see it in this draft. And again, it's not really a knock. It's nothing against it, just kind of interesting. After a few years now, they've really kind of gone after those players because other people are letting them fall. So they're still talented players. You're just not sure if they're ever going to really make the jump to North America, and they seem to be pretty successful, the Sabres, at signing those players so far. So I was interested to see that they didn't really go after too many in this draft. And again, it's not really a good thing or a bad thing, just kind of an interesting strategy that they kind of moved away from it in this one.
So free agency kicked off on Saturday. Sabres made some moves. I mean, they brought back Jost, Girgensons, and Oposo. I think I talked about it on Talking Buffalo. I was not expecting them to bring Girgensson and Oposo back, but they did. I mean, 1-year deals, $2.5 million isn't bad. I'm happy they brought Jost back. I know they didn't qualify him. They were hoping to get him back for lower than they would have had to qualify him for. They did that. All 1-year deals. Like it. They qualified Brett Murray and Linus Weisbach. I'm happy for them. They did not qualify Kel Clegg and Picard. I'm interested to see if Clegg comes back as more like a depth guy, but their defense core is just, it's loaded right now. And by loaded, I mean there's just too many bodies. I mean, they signed Connor Clifton to the 3-year, $10 million deal out of Boston. He was 23rd in hits last year with 208. And I know hits are kind of like a weird stat because, I mean, it's just hitting. Usually when you're hitting, you don't have the puck. So who really cares about that stat? But the interesting part is Samuelson led the Sabres last year with 107. So you're getting a bigger body defenseman who I think is going to be paired with Owen Power. So I think you got your Owen Power partner. And then Eric Johnson, who is a former number 1 overall pick, champion with Colorado. He said he had multiple teams to sign with. He signed with Buffalo. And then they just signed a bunch of goalies with Rochester. Tokarski's back. But I guess what was your thoughts on the 3 re-signings and the 2 free agent signings that have happened so far in free agency?
Really happy to have Yost back. I liked a lot of what he was able to bring in the kind of limited audition that he had with the Sabres. I like his physical play. He had a little bit of offensive play as well. I just like everything he brought. I thought he was going to be kind of the Gergensons replacement, and here we are with Gergensons again. I'm very interested to see what Opozo does on a smaller contract. I mean, I feel like these last few years with how the Sabres have gone in general, I don't think he's felt the pressure of his contract anymore. I mean, maybe originally when the Sabres were really pushing for playoffs and everybody was here and, they were not going through a massive rebuild, he might have felt the pressure of the contract that he had that was quite large. But maybe these last couple of years, he kind of settled into more of that leadership role and just not really worried about putting up a ton of points, even though he's been pretty successful for his age. So I just wonder if a smaller contract means anything more to him as far as just taking some of that pressure off. Maybe he'll just be a little bit more freewheeling, but having that duo back, I'm not really against it. Gergensons, I wasn't really for it necessarily, but at the same time, I don't think he's going to block anyone's development or anything. I think if they really see somebody absolutely take off, and now with the news of Jack Quinn being out for a while, I mean, again, you just need a body there. So not really upset with either of those. And then the 2 new signings of Clifton and Johnson. I love Johnson. It's something that the Sabres have been missing for quite a while with how young their team is. They don't really have a guy that has a Stanley Cup, and especially one that has been, I mean, we've talked about it before in this podcast, seeing Colorado go from a really bad team in last place all the way to Stanley Cup champions, and that's exactly what the Sabres are kind of trying to do. So having a guy like Erik Johnson who has been through that entire process and won the Stanley Cup, I think is just invaluable veteran leadership that really adds to the group of very young forward or defensemen who don't really have somebody to lean on. I mean, right now, yes, Dahlin has been improving. Yes, he's been doing great, but he shouldn't really be the veteran you're leaning on as a defenseman. I mean, he also is probably looking to someone to kind of raise his game. And I think Johnson's just going to be that guy that they can all kind of talk to and lean on, kind of like Anderson was last year, that player coach in a way who can still bring enough of, the stats and the lockdown defenseman. He's still going to be a valuable part of the on-ice team, but I think he brings a lot off ice. And then Connor Clifton's interesting. I think he's going to be to me, he's kind of a prove it guy this year. I mean, he's in his prime. 208 hits is great, and he's only 5'11", which is just kind of interesting that a smaller defenseman is out hitting the entire Sabres team by more than double. So I think it's going to be interesting to see just what kind of player he is. I mean, I know, again, he was on Boston, which is the biggest thing for me, just as far as looking at his stats goes. I mean, yes, he did really, really well, and I'm not trying to take anything away from him. I think he's going to do well, but he was also kind of covered by the league's hottest team in history. So I think that's going to be interesting to see what he can bring to the Sabres away from Boston and how just dynamic that team was this year. So I'm interested to see how he does kind of on his own on a new team, but I'm very happy with the signings they had.
Yeah, I'm very happy that Kevin Adams is addressing the areas that everybody knows they needed to, which was the defense core, because their defense core and their goaltending were their weakest spots. I think the goaltending will improve with the adjustments they made on the defensive end. I think Connor Clifton will probably be more of that Matthias Samuelsson role and will be what Matthias Samuelsson is to Dahlin, and I think Clifton will be that to Power, where Power will be able to be less reliant to get back on defense and be in the perfect position, because I think Clifton will be able to pair with him. I wish Erik Johnson was like 5 years younger, because if Johnson was like 5 years younger, he could have played those 22 to 24 minutes that Power's going to be doing. Maybe you're going to give him a shift every once in a while in the games. You're going to see Clifton and Johnson pair between back and forth. But I think the best thing about signing those two players, that's Erik Johnson and Clifton, they might not be a top pair defenseman, but you don't need that. You need a pairing for Owen Power, and then you needed to push Yoki Haru down to that third pairing. And I think that's going to help him as well. But my biggest thing here is you made all these moves, but you didn't move anybody out. You have 9 NHL defensemen right now and 3 NHL goalies. There's going to be moves made. What's interesting is I think you got your top 4. I think Samuelson's with Dahlin and Powers with Clifton. But then you got 5 guys making up for, 3 to 4 roles? Because are you going to have 2 healthy defensemen or just 1 and 2 healthy forwards? That's going to be the other interesting part, because you got Bryson, Johnson, Lyubushkin, Stillman, and Jokiharju. I think Stillman's probably safe, and I think Lyubushkin's probably safe because both of those were brought in by this management. Johnson's obviously safe because they just brought him in. Jokiharju, I think they still have high expectations for him. I think they like him more than the fan base does and the people that cover the team do, but he's also not a Kevin Adams guy. Jacob Bryson was also, I don't believe he was drafted by Kevin Adams. He did get re-signed by Kevin Adams, but he's making like $2.3 or some $1 million like that. I think Bryson or Jokiharju is probably going to be on the way out, maybe even Lyubushkin. I don't understand. And I guess not understand. I don't know which one of those players is going to be out the door, but you're definitely going to see a defenseman move either now in the offseason or in training camp. If somebody gets hurt, I mean, maybe that's why you bring 9 bodies to camp, but somebody's either going to be put on waivers or sent out the door, because there's no way, and there's no possible way you're keeping 9 NHL defensemen and 3 NHL goalies. It'll be interesting to see, and it's only Wednesday right now. We're recording Monday night, but it's only a few days into free agency, so there's going to be plenty of more moves to come. I'm expecting at least 1 forward move and maybe a goalie move.
Yeah, I know Adam said that he's perfectly comfortable with 9 defensemen going into camp. So I think that's also something you kind of have to say as a GM. You don't want to say, oh, we're obviously, we're really strapped on defensemen. We need to get rid of some of these guys in order to go into camp with this exact number that we're looking for. Obviously, you don't want to just kind of put that message out there. So it was interesting hearing him say that he's okay with that. But like you said, I mean, just because you're going into camp with all these guys in case you get an injury doesn't mean you're going to keep them all the way through camp. So I think a defenseman at some point will be moved, like you mentioned. I think Yoki probably has the most trade value out of any of those players, just because of what he can bring as an offensive forward. And he's proven he's streaky for sure, but he's gone on hot streaks where he's, kind of shown what he can bring to a team. So I think it's going to be interesting to see exactly what you said, like who ends up being moved and who ends up being here. The 3 goalies, again, I don't know either if you're going to keep all 3. So that's going to be interesting as well. I don't even know what the ideal situation for the goalies is. I mean, I do believe UPL can still develop into something. I think he just needs more time. Levi, I think, is the one that they are likely hoping pans out the best. And we saw it at the end of last year that in all those big games, he's the one they relied on. And then Comrie just had major injury problems. So you're not really sure what he is, but he's the most veteran goalie on the team right now. So at the same time, if you cut him because you don't think he's going to be your future, you now are just counting on what is essentially, I mean, yes, UPL's been here for a little bit, but he's essentially pretty much still a rookie. So you're counting on 2 very, I don't know, not veteran whatsoever, rookie type goalies to lead you through. And I don't know how that's going to go. So it'll be interesting to see how this team still continues to develop in the offseason. But overall, for the start through the draft and through free agency, like you said, right away, day one, you're focusing on the defense. Everyone knows that they need to get better there, and I think Adams was able to do that. So far, good start.
Good start, minus the Jack Quinn injury, but that's something you can't control. Yeah, no. That definitely was a big blow. It was disappointing, but maybe that opens up a spot for maybe Savoy starts in the Sabres. Maybe Kulik earns a spot. Maybe you see Middlestead on that line as well. I mean, even maybe Lucas or Rusick, he might get a chance too. So you might see somebody's got to step up in that role because he's not going to be back until December at the earliest. But we'll move on to our final segment here. If any other major Sabres news breaks, we'll jump in. But Bandits, we last week, Phil, we did our NHL rankings of the cities. I got some hate because I don't know. Somebody said that how do you have one person rank New York at like 14 and the other one at 4? And I responded, weird. 2 people have different opinions. How's that supposed to work? Interesting. But yeah, it got some positive and negative reviews, but that's fine. I mean, you can't all agree on the same thing. We didn't agree on the same thing. We had very similar top 5s, maybe top 6s, but for the most part, I think we like some things about other teams more than the other person did, which is perfectly fine. We're allowed to do that. So for today, though, Phil, did you know the Buffalo Bandits just they won a championship about, I don't know, month ago?
I did not. I must have missed it, if we're going to be honest.
Yeah, they just won.
Weird.
So
Okay.
my biggest question, and you got like 11 months until the NLL championship is back. My question, and we both made top threes, what are the top 3 ways the Buffalo Bandits will repeat as champions next season? I guess we'll start with number 3 and work to number 1. So I guess what's your third way, or your top 3, number 3 way that the Buffalo Bandits will be able to repeat next year and be back-to-back champions?
It was tough to have this list because they've been really good for,
yes,
I don't know if you've noticed, but they've been really good for a really long time now. And they're starting to become, I mean, I would assume from outside fan bases and opinions, they are
Dynasty.
already the team that you really, really, really don't like in the NLL. But as insider Bandits fans, I assume we are officially at that level where you've been to 3 straight championships. Now you won 1. You're the team that nobody wants to see back there again. So I don't know, like that was kind of just the tough part of this list was they're really good and they've
Agreed.
shown that they can go to 3 straight finals and finally won 1. So I guess starting really simple as number 3, just kind of repeat. I mean, you've done it now 3 straight seasons, which is just, I know I keep bringing it up. That's insane to think that this team has been to 3 straight finals. It's extremely impressive to pull off and not easy whatsoever. And now you finally won 1. And so obviously between the defense, the offense, the goalie, the coaching, the GM, everybody is doing everything correct. They know what they're doing. They've gotten to it 3 straight times. You just won 1. So number 3, plain and simple, just repeat what you're doing.
I like it. I went a little bit more in depth with my number 3. I don't hate yours because I think that's the easiest way to sum it up is just, hey, what you've been doing the last 3 years, just do it again. I think I guess I'll frame this question for you because I know you're going to know the answer. What was the biggest thing that we were calling for the Buffalo Bandits to be able to do last year throughout the entire season and into playoffs? It was a major thing that we thought they were lacking and something that we even wanted them to try to address, not just in the offseason, but at the trade deadline last year. Transition. My number 3 is get Dylan Robinson involved in the transition game. I kind of called him Mickey Light. I don't think he is to the point in his career, which is not shocking whatsoever because he was a rookie last year and is very young. But I think he has the ability to be that Ian McKay type role where, you know, we mentioned it. There's a number of players that can't get hurt for this team, and Ian McKay is one of them. But if you have a guy who can play a similar role to Ian McKay back in your back pocket, and Dylan Robinson, and have another guy that can be involved in the transition game. The guy is just so quick, Dylan Robinson is. I think what hurt him was he just got hurt in his 12th game. And if he had not gotten hurt, I think you would have seen him more in that transition game because I think he was earning more of that trust by the coaching staff. So my number 3 is if you can get Dylan Robinson involved in that transition game, you will cover yourself in the event that Ian McKay does get hurt. And I know everybody held their breath when he got, banged up in that, I think it was the game 1 of the playoffs with the finals versus Colorado, where he came down, it was non-contact on his knee, and everybody was walking off the field just like, what the heck just happened? Maybe it was the Toronto game. I can't really remember which game it was, but if you can get Dylan Robinson more involved in the transition game and move him more from just a defense to a true transition player, I think you'll cover your butts in case of an injury there.
I like it. I like Dylan Robinson quite a bit, so good. I
won you over.
It's a good one.
You over.
Yeah, it was pretty simple because I love transition and I like Dylan Robinson. And I mean, we've talked about it before that we've seen him be that kind of youthful speed out of the back, out of defense that when he has the ball and he's sprinting from defense to offense, you can kind of always tell it's him because most of the guys kind of take their time. It's kind of not really a knock against them. It's kind of just one of the things the Bandits have settled into is, again, we've talked about it forever, that defense to offense transition. They like to do the full transition, but Dylan Robinson being a rookie, being young, being fast. You always know that he has the ball coming out of the defense because he goes full speed and he's over the line by, 28 seconds, where the other guys are sticking their stick over at 22 seconds and passing it off to Dane to do what he does best. So I do like it. And I do think he has it in him.
Well, can you win me over with your number 2?
Yeah, my number 2, I'm going to kind of piggyback off what you said and group 2-ish together. So my number 2 is part A, stay healthy, because,
Yep.
this is really the first year we've seen this team get as banged up as they were. It was really rough to see as a Bandits fan that they just got, injury after injury, and they lost a lot of big names for a lot of the season. So the one thing is stay healthy, but on top of that, it's about the younger guys stepping up into bigger roles. The LaRue, the Nate Kays, that I'm not going to try to say his name right now. And just those younger players like a Dylan Robinson as well, like exactly what you just mentioned. If Ian McKay does go down, who's going to step up into that role? So some of these younger players that you have that when they need to be called upon, just being able to grow in this next year and really take that next offseason to kind of be in that position that if there is an injury, they can really step up and be that guy to take over the next spot. I think it's really, really tough for the Bandits' younger players because they don't get a lot of play time to be able to develop. Obviously, they're practicing, but practice is nothing like game experience. I think, we've seen it for every single sport across the board. It takes an entire full season of playing full games to really kind of understand what it is to be a rookie and to really play in the NLL. And a lot of these guys just don't get that opportunity because the Bandits, as we just mentioned, have the roster to go to 3 straight championships. The roster is beyond stacked, and they continue to bring that roster back as they should. So there's just not a lot of holes or, opportunities for these players to develop, which makes it very tough on them trying to simply develop through practice only, essentially, and getting the limited opportunities they get. But just having those guys find a way to continue their own personal development. I know the NLL GMs and management seem to trust all of the younger players they have on the team in those depth roles. So just want to see them kind of take that next step next season.
Yeah, we must be back in sync because my number 2 just says stay healthy. And I know they were able to withstand all the injuries this year. And I think a lot of that, other guys stepping up, other guys taking over roles that they typically aren't used to. I think that is a major, major, major reason that they walked out NLL champions this year because they were battle tested all this year. The previous year, they were just coasting through the regular season, just walloping up on everybody. And then when they met the Colorado Mammoth in the finals, they met a match they just couldn't overcome because they hadn't met that challenge before. I think with Josh Byrne being injured, Kluch being injured, Frazier being injured most of the game, you had Nanakoke in and out of the lineup. The only main guys that stayed healthy were Smith and Buchanan on the front end. And then the back end, you also had injuries there as well with, Bomberry was in and out and Priola missed the game 1 too. So, the front end definitely was a lot more injured than the back end. But yeah, if you can stay healthy, you're able to jive as a team more. And I think now that you got the monkey off your back, which winning that championship, you proved to yourself you finally were able to get over it. You defeated the Mammoth and got through with that. I think if you're able to stay healthy throughout the entire year, you're going to be able to see them be able to connect more as a team throughout the entire 18-game schedule where they're not going to need those final 2 games as more of like a tune-up and a game to kind of jive back together where you're going to have the entire season length to be able to do that. So I think we both, I also agree with like the younger guys stepping up because we don't know, Bucky, if he's going to be coming back. We mentioned that on our BSC Awards show of guys stepping up as well. And we want to see more. And we mentioned Sam LaRue and Nate Konecznikoff. And I think you put those 2 together perfectly. So I like your 1A, 1B combo for number 2. So Phil, number 1, what is the top way that the Buffalo Bandits can repeat next season?
Well, it slightly ties into that last comment you just made. And for me...
And I think we have the same number 1.
It's going to be re-sign the veterans. And that is mainly Buchanan, Vince, and Priolo. Find a way, no matter what you have to do. I don't care if you have to drag all 3 of them back into the arena and just force them to play. Find a way to get those guys back on this team. I don't really no, and it's really hard for the Bandits right now because you've gone to 3 straight. You've won 1. Your championship window is still open, but at what point do you try to shift and look toward the future? So it's very complicated now that they have a championship officially. It's kind of just that, I don't know, that really complicated situation of you got it, you're still in your championship window, the core of your team is still there, you can absolutely repeat next year, but at what point do you start, really buckling down and looking toward the future of this team? And I don't know when that championship window is going to close. Right now, I would say all the players, for the most part, that are on this team are in their prime, with some of those younger guys continuing to get better, like a Dylan Robinson. And again, if you stay healthy, this team's even scarier than they were, already winning the entire NLL in the regular season and then obviously won the championship. So the championship window for this team is still open, and a big part of that is because of Vince Priolo and Buchanan. So I think right now, to me, it's not time to move on from those players while they're still willing to come back. If they're still willing to come back, we don't know one way or another for any of those guys what they're thinking after they just won a championship. So, I mean, it's going to be probably the same situation for them mentally. Do they want to come back and run through the whole grind of a season again now that they have a championship, or do they ride off into the sunset with that championship, or do they really want to come back and try to go back-to-back and be the first team? I think it was, 2012, 2013, somewhere around there, was the last back-to-back champions in the NLL, so it's been almost a decade since you've had it, so do they want to, run it back with this incredible team that they have, and knowing that you've been to 3 straight, can they make it 4? Can they win 2 in a row? I mean, everything's there for them to do it again, but it's going to be up to those veterans to want to come back and do it again. So to me, that is still the number one way that you're going to try to run it back, is if you have Vince, Priolo, and Buchanan. Those are 3 humongous pieces to this team, and without them, it's still an extremely good team. Obviously, I'm not going to take anything away from the rest of the roster, but we've talked about how much Vince means to the team. We talked about Priolo in games when he had those 10-minute misconducts, what the defense looks like without him and his leadership. I don't think they currently have someone that is stepping up into that role yet. They might have it on the roster and it'll eventually develop, but right now, I think all 3 of those players are still massive pieces to this team, and I don't know if they get back to the championship without them.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said. I think mine is just a little bit more pinpoint, because I think Steve Priolo is going to be coming back with everything he made. I think Dane Smith, I don't think he's going to be going anywhere. Nick Weiss is a UFA. Ethan O'Connor's a UFA. I don't see them going off in the sunset either. Buchanan, who knows if he's going to be this one and done type of player. Hey, I got mine. I'm at the tail end of my career. I don't think he's anywhere near not being able to play anymore. It's just, is he going to want to go through a whole nother season of taking the beating after beating after beating after playing every single game last season? Mine is just very simple. Do whatever you have to do to convince Matt Vince not to retire. Convince Vince to not retire. That's it. I mean, if you're able to convince him not to retire, I think
the Bandits is just convince Vince.
Convince Vince. That's the hashtag slogan that I'm going to be putting out there nonstop. Now, every tweet I'm going to put is going to be convince Vince. It's just get Vince to come back and re-sign with this team, because this team is not a championship team without Matt Vince. I know there are other pieces around, but I think there's a reason that he won MVP for the BSC for the Buffalo Bandits. And I think there's a reason that he was voted MVP for the Buffalo Bandits from the players. They know how important he is to the team. They don't win a championship if it's not Matt Vince. Gave up 4 goals in Game 3, Phil. I know the defense had a lot to do with it, but Matt Vince is still the one between the pipes. I've even offered my services. I will lay down in front of any puddle that gets in Matt Vince's way so his feet do not get wet. I don't want to take him to have a chance of having a little toe that is cold going into a game time. Whatever I can do as I'll take my bias and put it right in front here. I am being very biased with this one. Whatever the Buffalo Bandits organization needs me to do, if you need me to drive to wherever he lives and be his chauffeur to get him to the games, I will do that. If you need me to be his nutrition, I'll go to college to be a nutritionist. I don't care what I have to do to get Matt Vince back on this team, because if he is not back on this team, I don't know what the Buffalo Bandits are going to do. I know they will probably be in contention for the playoffs, but I don't think they are a championship team. I have very high hopes for Delvin Shanahan in the future. I'm being a little selfish. I don't want to see Delvin Shanahan next year between the pipes as your starting goaltender for the Buffalo Bandits. That is not a shot at him whatsoever. It's just when you have the greatest goaltender and possibly greatest NLL player of all time between the pipes and Matt Vince, you need him back and you desperately want him back. So my number one is very simple. Convince Vince.
I'm surprised and not surprised, I guess, that our top two are pretty identical.
I think you summed it up perfectly. It's hard to be very critical of a team that just won a championship and
has been there
there's not
3 straight years.
I think your number 3 summed it up perfect. Just repeat what you did.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, that's why like coming up with this list, I was like, I don't know, because it's not one of those things where like sometimes in the NFL we saw. I guess we'll take the first thing that kind of comes to my head: the Giants that went into the playoffs, were they 9-9 when they won their Super Bowl?
Right.
So that's a team that you're like, okay, yes, we won the Super Bowl. They were all close games. We have things that we can do to get better. This team has been at the very top level 3 straight years going to championships, back-to-back championships, finally won the championship. So it's really hard to nitpick a team that has been at the top for this long. It's not like they're even... they made it to playoffs and they were out round 1. Okay, then they, made it to round 2, but they were out in round 2. Okay, now you got to the championship. Like, this team's been the East Conference Final or East Division Final champion 3 straight times, and now you finally won the championship. So it's very hard to say much other than be healthy and go and do it again.
Yeah, I think it like we went through all season long, this team is just so good. It's tough to nitpick them. And that's kind of what we had to do all season long. It's just you got to nitpick these tiny little things and find out exactly, yes, Matt Vince had a bad game, but he's going to have bad games every once in a while. He lets squeakers in. Yes, Dane Smith had 5 assists in this game and no other goals. Yeah, it's tough to be so critical of a team as much as we can be while still being, covering the team. You have to be a little bit critical when they lose. Like when they lost against Colorado in that game too, we addressed what we thought was going to be wrong with it. But it's tough to look at a list. I mean, I even had like top 5. I went into this creating the segment of what's your top 5 ways for the Bandits. And I didn't just trim it down to make the episode a bit shorter for us and less editing for me, but I really was trying to come up with top 5 reasons, and I was struggling to find 5 ways that they could repeat next year without, being like sell out each time that they have a home game. That was one of mine. Like, can you sell out each time? It's just make that place crazy. It's just, I thought top 3 was probably the best way, and even then it was kind of like a stretch of just like both of our number 2s. Just stay healthy. I mean, obviously, but that's where we're at with this team.
Yeah, I think my only bonus one would be, and it'll never happen, but the one thing I want more than anything is to have Josh Allen do a t-shirt toss, and that's it. I think
that one guy that's on the field on our side, he's got a cannon. Yeah. I mean, he's not Josh Allen, but he's getting those t-shirts up into the 200 level, and that's impressive when you're just throwing a t-shirt that comes unraveled.
I feel like they wouldn't want Josh Allen throwing a t-shirt because you probably throw out your arm that way. But, I mean, I'll take Kyle Allen. I'll take Matt Barkley. Just give me an NFL quarterback to throw a t-shirt toss. I want to see what they can do. I mean, obviously, Josh Allen with the humongous arm he has, that's what I want to see more than anything. But I also don't want him injured. So I get it. But, I think that'd be a lot of fun. That's my only bonus way that they will repeat. I don't know what that has to do with the Bandits repeating, but it's something I want to see next year.
So, Phil, we talked about the PHF, the sad news about possibly the Buffalo Beauts disappearing and our coverage with them coming to a conclusion in a bitter end. We talked about the Buffalo Sabres draft and their free agency. We just gave the top 3 ways that the Buffalo Bandits can repeat. Is there anything else you want to add to this episode before we shut it down and wait till next Wednesday for another riveting episode of the BSC?
No, I think we're good. It was a pretty jam-packed one, and then, like you said, started sad, and I think the Sabres are doing some good things. The Bandits obviously are I mean, they're pretty quiet, but they've been doing good things for a long time, and they just need to keep that rolling. So I think overall we're good to wrap this up.
I am excited to hear that because we got a 4th of July coming up, which, it was the day before when you're listening to this, but I got a family party to go to. Excited to get this thing edited and out and I'm very excited for next week's episode because there's probably not going to be a ton of news. I mean, of course, now the Sabres are going to make 3 trades and we're going to have that, but we're going to keep diving into more creative ways until the season starts kicking off. Training camp is right around the corner for the Buffalo Bills, and then you got other stuff with the Sabres, and then by the time you know it, the Buffalo Bandits will be back in action looking to defend their title and raising that banner. So thank you all for listening to another episode of the Buffalo Sports Collective. Follow along with us on Facebook and Instagram at Buffalo Sports Collective and on Twitter at Buffalo Sports Co. Visit our website at buffalosportscollective.com. Subscribe to our channel wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure you leave us that review on Apple and Spotify. Until next time, bye-bye.